Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Global Engagement Summit. I am Rachel Bone Pittman, Executive Director of the United Nations Association of the USA, also known as UNA USA. Typically on this day, I would be speaking to you from the dais in the General Assembly Hall at UN headquarters, where UNA USA members would convene for a day of collaboration aimed to enhance our global connection. But today, I'm excited to welcome you virtually and greet not just UNA USA members, but those who are brand new to our movement and getting to know us. We do have very important VIPs waiting in the wings, so I don't want to waste another moment. At this time, I'm excited to introduce Elizabeth Cousins, the UN Foundation's President and Chief Executive Officer. As a diplomat, Elizabeth has worked on the front lines of peace processes and has been at the forefront of global policymaking and innovation for over 20 years. Please welcome Elizabeth.
Thank you, Rachel, and good afternoon, everybody. I am so thrilled on behalf of the United Nations Foundation and the United Nations Association of the USA to welcome you all to this year's historic Global Engagement Summit. For over a decade, we have been proud to bring to the UN the largest and most diverse group of Americans who believe in the United Nations. And we are so honored that this year's summit is happening on a day of such symbolic and historic importance, as the United States re-enters the Paris Climate Agreement that it embraced so proudly just over 5 years ago. The Paris Agreement itself is remarkable. 195 countries pledging to reduce emissions to stem the warming of our extraordinary planet, and reaching agreement at lightning speed. Paris saw the swiftest and largest endorsement of an international agreement in modern history. So it was history making then, and of course it is about making a better future now. Mr. Secretary General, Special Envoy Kerry, you have before you, virtually, thousands of Americans who believe deeply in the purposes and values of the United Nations. Over 5,000 are online today, and they represent thousands more. They come from every state in the Union. They're college students, community leaders, young professionals, subject matter experts, veteran UNA members. They're Democrats, Republicans, and independents, and they reflect the full diversity of America and the deep conviction that we solve our toughest challenges best when we solve them together, when we reach out hands, when we combine our strengths, and when we unite in the spirit of common humanity and solidarity, which is, of course, what the United Nations is all about and what the climate emergency most demands us to do. The last year and the global pandemic that we continue to battle has shined the brightest possible light on our interdependence as countries, as communities, as economies, and as citizens. As we all continue the COVID battle, we know that 19 of the last 20 years have been the warmest on record. We know that devastating wildfires are now a cruel annual ritual for large swaths of the American West. We see the deadly impact of extreme weather events like the winter storm gripping Texas and other states as we speak. And we know the inequity of climate impacts here and around the world. Yet we also see the incredible potential in our economy, our communities, and our lives if we make a decisive transition to a climate-friendly future. We have all been so heartened by the climate leadership of the UN, which is indispensable. And we are greatly energized by the renewed climate leadership of the United States. From the work of Secretary Kerry and so many others to secure the Paris Agreement in the first place, to the states, cities, businesses, NGOs, faith leaders, and others who held firm to US climate commitments in the last 4 years, to the Biden-Harris administration's unequivocal commitment to climate action, to environmental justice, and to ambition today. That is why we are so honored that we are able to mark this historic moment together. So without further ado, let me introduce our first opening speaker, the 9th Secretary General of the United Nations, António Guterres. He is a tireless advocate for human possibility, for science, and for values of equity and solidarity. Secretary General Guterres has made the climate emergency a top priority. He has urged us to make peace with nature. He's calling on us to be serious, and he is inspiring us to see the incredible opportunities if we are brave enough to change. Mr. Secretary General, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear Special Envoy, dear John Kerry, Ambassador Elizabeth Cousins, dear friends. Let me begin by thanking the UN Foundation and the United Nations Association of the United States. You are a force multiplier, educating, advocating, and mobilizing for global cooperation and advancing shared values to take on our many challenges. Day after day, you work for change and inspire hope. And today is a day of hope, as the United States officially rejoins the Paris Agreement. This is good news for the United States and for the world. It is a pleasure to mark this occasion with you all, and particularly with Special Envoy John Kerry, whose own work is reflected in this historic agreement. For the past 4 years, the absence of a key player created a gap in the Paris Agreement, a missing link that weakened the whole. So today, as we mark the United States' re-entry into this treaty, we also recognize its restoration in its entirety and its creators, as its creators intended. Welcome back. Dear friends, the Paris Agreement is an historic achievement, but the commitments made so far are not enough. And even those commitments made in Paris are not being met. The warning signs are everywhere. The 6 years since 2015 have been the 6 hottest years on record. Carbon dioxide levels are at record highs. Fires, floods, and other extreme weather events are getting worse in every region. If we don't change course, we could face a catastrophic temperature rise of more than 3 degrees this century. And this year, 2021, is pivotal. COP26 in Glasgow will be a make it or break it occasion. Governments will take decisions that will determine the future of people and planet. The United States, together with all members of the G20, has a decisive role in delivering our 3 main objectives. First, the long-term vision. A central objective for the United Nations this year is to create a truly global coalition for net zero emissions by 2050. In the past year, countries representing 70% of the world economy and 65% of global carbon dioxide emissions committed to net zero. I hope that the United Nations will formally join this coalition very soon, as pledged by President Biden, and will present its concrete plans to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Second, delivering a decade of transformation. The science is clear. We need exponential progress on reducing emissions now. We expect all governments to present more ambitious, concrete, and credible national determined contributions for the next 10 years by COP26 in November. I commend all the American states, cities, businesses, and financial institutions, the civil society, the people that have shown impressive leadership since 2015 by committing to the goals of the Paris Agreement through the We Are Still In declaration. We rely on the United States to build on this with an ambitious and credible national determined contribution for 2030, aligned with President Biden's commitment to achieve net zero emissions before 2050. Third, the actions we need now. The recovery from the pandemic is an opportunity to rebuild stronger and better. To do this, we must invest in a green economy that will help to heal the planet and its people and create well-paying, stable jobs to ensure more equitable and sustainable prosperity. Now is the time to implement transformative change, phase out coal, support a just transition with training and opportunities for people whose jobs will be impacted, stop investing in fossil fuel projects that ruin people's health, destroy biodiversity, and contribute to the climate catastrophe. Shift the tax burden from income to carbon, from consumers to polluters. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we also need to close the finance gap by supporting countries that are suffering the ravaging impacts of the climate crisis. That support must reach the countries and people who are most impacted. Women and girls bear the brunt of the climate crisis. Fully 80% of those displaced by climate change are women. I urge all G7 countries to deliver concrete results on finance at their summit in June. Those that have not done so already must commit to doubling their climate finance. And all developed countries must honor the pledge to contribute $100 billion annually to developing countries. I'm also asking all donors to commit to increasing the share of climate finance allocated to adaptation to reach 50%. And I ask all financial institutions and banks to align their investments with the Paris Agreement by 2024. I count on the United States, together with all other G20 members, to rally behind these three main objectives and to engage in the international negotiations that will be needed for success at COP26. Dear friends, when Special Envoy John Kerry signed the Paris Agreement in 2016, he brought his granddaughter to the United Nations with him. We cannot be together today, but we can all reflect on our responsibilities to future generations. The Paris Agreement is our pact with our descendants and the whole human family. This is the race of our lifetimes. We must go much faster and much further. It is within our power to build a future of renewable energy and green infrastructure that protects people and planet and ensures prosperity for all. Let's get to work, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. I now have the great pleasure of introducing one of America's most distinguished public servants and statesmen, one of our fiercest and most determined champions of protecting the planet and its people, and someone for whom I had the pleasure personally of working. Former Secretary of State John Kerry is now the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, a role that will be absolutely pivotal in this and coming years in the reassertion of U.S. climate leadership and in our collective fight for a healthy, fair, and sustainable future. Special Envoy Kerry, the floor is yours.
Well, Madam Ambassador Elizabeth, thank you so much for the introduction, a generous introduction. Thanks for your tremendous work, what you're doing at the UN Foundation and what you've always done. And I greatly, greatly appreciate your stewardship. My former Senate colleague, Tim Wirth, and one of the senators I traveled with to Rio for the very first Earth Summit, has invested years in making the foundation the extraordinary leader that it is, and did so at the very start of the fight on climate. And I know you have invested really enormous leadership now at a time when we have to finish the job. Thank you also for letting me poach mightily from the UN Foundation's expertise. As we built our team in the Biden administration, I've been able to rob from you, so I owe you deeply. I'm also delighted to be with everybody, but particularly my friend and a great leader, the Secretary General of the United Nations. And I'm delighted to mark this important day with him. I think every word he said, I completely agree with. I hope all of you do. He's been tireless in running around the world and helping to energize people to focus on the enormous challenge that we face. And I thank him for reminding me and perhaps some of you of the presence of my granddaughter when I signed the Paris Agreement at the United Nations. And I will share with you all that when I finished, my granddaughter was on my knee and I took her back and handed her to her mother. And my granddaughter turned to both her mother and me and said, "Mommy, I know signed paper." So I owe my granddaughter a new piece of paper to sign, if you get the drift. The United Nations Association has always been a leading edge advocate for the most principled, pragmatic, multilateral cooperation here and around the world. It's been obviously tested over the last 4 years. And in the course of the test of the last 4 years, the association's membership has stood up and fought hard. And that's in the great tradition, of course, of an early champion, Eleanor Roosevelt, who said, "Alone, we cannot keep the peace of the world, but in cooperation with others, we have to achieve security." She couldn't be more right, and the same could be said and should be said about climate change. I think we have to end the word climate change and own up to the fact it is the climate crisis now. And that's why President Biden submitted the paperwork to immediately rejoin the Paris Agreement as soon as he could, hours after he was sworn in. Today, as you've heard and as you know, it is absolutely official. The United States is once again a party to the Paris Agreement. And I'm proud and pleased with that fact, but it also places on us a special responsibility. We rejoin the international climate effort with humility and with ambition. Humility, knowing that we lost 4 years during which America was absent from the table, and humility in knowing that today no country and no continent is getting the job done. But also with ambition, knowing that Paris alone will not do what science tells us we must do together. At the COP in November, this November, when we go to Glasgow, all nations must raise our sights, must raise ambition together, or we will all fail together. Needless to say, for all of us here partaking in this at this moment, failure is not an option. And that's why raising the ambition is so vitally important. According to the most recent statistics, and you've heard António talk about the evidence that we're seeing in various parts of the world, but we know from the measurements, from the statistics, from the science, that emissions globally rose over the years since Paris. 2020 saw a drop in global emissions due to COVID, but already they're again on the rise. And many analysts expect a very quick rebound to where we were, rising even more unless very stringent policies are put in place. So to be on track to keep even a 66% probability of keeping global temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees, to do that, we need to cut global emissions in half by 2030. So that means we need to phase out coal 5 times faster than we have been. We need to increase tree cover 5 times faster. We need to ramp up renewable energy 6 times faster. We need to transition to electric vehicles at a rate 22 times faster. You get the drift? Everything has to be done with greater sense of urgency, with the determination that we have to win this fight. Now, can we do that? Can we win it? Absolutely, my friends, we can. And we need the United States and every country to determine they will get on a path toward net zero emissions by 2050. That is not something that we will do by countries just stepping up and saying, hey, we commit, here we are, yeah, we'll do it by 2050. That doesn't cut it. That is not the way that we get to go to Glasgow. We go to Glasgow, all of us, being real about exactly what we need to do starting now. What steps will we take in the next 10 years? And the truth is that everybody has to do that. China, which is the largest emitter in the world, needs to be part of the 2020 to 2030 effort. India needs to be part of it. Russia needs to be part of it. Japan, all the big emitting countries of the world, the major emitters, 17 nations, need to really step up and begin to lower those emissions. This challenge means that all countries setting bold and achievable targets have to do so here at home and in the course of their declaration of their national determined contributions, their NDCs. And we have to drive investment toward climate solutions and innovations in resilience. We need to get the entire world on a path towards net zero emissions, and we need to absolutely make certain that happens no later than 2050 and sooner if possible. Ultimately, keeping alive the possibility of limiting the planet's warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius is critical, because we now know that anything more than that will have catastrophic implications around the globe. So, my friends, we have to make every month count, every day count on the road to the UN Climate Conference. COP26, this November in Glasgow. It is the Leaders Summit that we're going to hold on April 22nd that we believe will be an important opportunity to begin to put the down payments on the table to advance the work of Glasgow. And we're planning to take advantage of every opportunity we have in the coming months, including the G7, the G20, the Arctic Council, as well as the UN General Assembly and other UN opportunities. So this is a packed year. This is the most important year in many ways. We're all in, and we're deeply grateful to have a strong partner in Secretary General Guterres. I will say to you that after many years of doing this, going back to Jim Hansen and his first announcements to us in Congress in 1988 that climate was happening, the climate was changing, from then until today, I've been to many, many of these meetings, as many of you have. I believe that Glasgow is our last best hope to get the world to pony up, to deliver, to get us on a safer path, to determine that we will do the things necessary in the next decade to keep alive the prospect of limiting the Earth's temperature rise to 1.5 degrees, and we will keep alive, in fact, create a better vision for what we can do by 2050 with net zero. That is what we intend to do as we head to Glasgow, and I hope every single one of you will be hand in hand with us as you were during the last 4 years to keep us in the Paris Agreement, even though we had a president who got out. The majority of Americans are committed to this task, so let's get the job done. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Special Envoy Kerry, for that powerful call to action and your instruction to make every day count. We'll now take a few questions from our UNA audience. And I'm delighted to introduce two members of UNA USA who are incredible climate champions in their own right. Let me give the floor first to Himaja Nagareddy of UNA Harvard. Himaja, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Cousins, and I'm honored to be here. My question is, young people are among the most concerned and outspoken about the climate emergency, as well as the crisis caused by COVID-19, including the impact on youth employment and education. What action is needed to green the economy and boost decent jobs for youth?
Thank you, Himaja. Let me introduce next Thomas Liu of UNA National Capital Area. Thomas.
Thank you, Ambassador Cousins. Hello, and thank you for allowing me to pose a question. So the world is still moving in the wrong direction to achieve the Paris goal of 1.5. Is this still realistic to think we can do it given all the obstacles? And how will we win over the opponents and naysayers? Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Himaja and Thomas, both of you. Let me turn first to the Secretary General to respond.
Well, first of all, the good news about jobs is that the green economy is much more job creator than the brown economy of the past. If we invest in renewable energy, if we invest in greening our transportation systems, if we invest in greening our agriculture, if we invest in greening all the areas of our economy, we'll be creating lots of jobs. And most of those jobs will benefit young people that have access to the new technologies, that have access to the knowledges of the 21st century. But we need at the same time to look into a just transition. We need to make sure that we look at those that will lose their jobs because their activities will phase out, as it is the case already for many other reasons, namely because of technology evolution. And we need to invest in the training of these people, young people and adults. We need to make sure that we support the regions that will be impacted. So with the strong boost that the green economy will give to job creation, and with governments particularly paying particular attention to a just transition to support the people and the regions that will be negatively impacted by the phase out of some of the brown economy activities, I think we will be in a condition that will be highly favorable for the young generations. And then, I mean, is it possible? Of course it is possible. But for it to be possible, we need to do exactly what John Kerry just said. For the United States, what the Europeans have announced in relation to their own national determined contributions for 2030. We need a drastic reduction in the emissions in the next decade. We need to get to net zero in 2050. And the scientific community has told us that if the two things are achieved, we'll be able to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees of growth at the end of the century. So the science tells us it's possible. We need the political will, the determination, the enthusiasm to make things happen. And so I would say I'm not optimistic. I'm determined. And we all must be determined to make it happen and to make it happen together.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary General, as always, for your determination. And now to Special Envoy Kerry for your response to our questioners.
Well, I agree. I agree with Antonio. I think the Secretary General's laid it out very clearly, but let me add a couple of things to it, if I may. What is the cause of the climate crisis? The cause of the climate crisis is bad energy choices, bad energy policy. Energy policy is the controlling factor here, and also nature-based choices that we make. There are nature-based solutions. But the biggest, most important thing we have to do is make better energy choices. Now, there are millions of people around the planet already doing that. Solar is growing at the faster rate than anything else. Coal plants are now no longer financeable in many parts of the world. One of the things we have to do is stop financing coal and begin to transition to the cleaner energy possibilities. Massive amount of money is beginning to move into the technology, innovation, and discovery that can produce new products and new techniques by which we can deal. For instance, if we can get battery storage that has 25 days or 30 days, this problem is greatly resolved in many ways, because then we have the intermittent lack of wind or lack of sun or lack of water to be able to be made up for by the storage. And then the base load, as it's called, for companies, factories to be able to continue to work at night when the sun isn't shining or when the wind isn't blowing, you begin to have an assurance about the ability to keep your economy moving. That is absolutely doable. Many people are now pursuing hydrogen economy. And hydrogen, if we can make it green, that is, not have this huge energy intensity that creates the hydrogen, if we can get it to be a green produced hydrogen, it's going to be a game changer all around the world. But the big thing we have to do is have the determination by countries, particularly the major emitting nations of the world. I mean, just think about this. Europe is about 14% of emissions. The United States is 15%. China is 30%. You're already over 50% all of the emissions, and you just have three entities. No wonder some people in the world are angry about what is happening right now. So those countries must step up. And what's so important to understand, and the Secretary General just referred to it, this is the biggest market the world has ever known. And it is a market in which investments will earn money. If you're building new cars, electric vehicles, people will buy them. You're going to have more electricity demand. Therefore, if you produce more electricity clean, people will make money in those new power plants. So the fact is that companies around the world are suddenly waking up to the fact this is not something that requires expenditure, it requires investment. And there can be a return on that investment that actually finances many of these new projects. So I'm as excited as the Secretary General is. This could be the greatest economic transformation for the positive side, creation of millions of new jobs, unbelievable raise in the quality of life when we have less particulates in the air, less cancer, less emphysema, less asthma for children. We have greater security in our nations because we're not threatened to go to war over the guarding and safe providing of energy sources. So the world will be better off with this transition, and it is now absolutely certain in every model that it is more expensive. We will pay more taxpayer money around the world if we don't do this now than if we do it. It's less expensive to, in fact, respond to the climate crisis.
Thank you so much, Special Envoy Kerry. And again, Mr. Secretary General, to you both, our deepest gratitude for your leadership, absolutely for your determination, for your inspiration, the challenge that you pose to us all, and to the work ahead in which we all stand ready to join you. You have also given us the most compelling and momentous way to begin this year's Global Engagement Summit, and we thank you for that too. So I am just delighted now to turn the floor over to our fearless leader, Rachel Bowen-Pittman, UNA USA Executive Director, to take it from here. Rachel, over to you.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Secretary General Guterres and Special Envoy Kerry, for being with us today to celebrate this important moment in American history. What a way to kick off the 2021 UNA-USA Global Engagement Summit. Know that you can count on UNA-USA to support the movement in fighting climate change. And to all those who are joining us via live stream, you'll be able to see the rest of the summit by registering at unausa.org. We talk a lot about global engagement, and that might seem abstract to some. What it is really is an agreement and understanding that we all have a role to play in the complex problems facing our cities, our states, our country, this world. In every case, it starts with the individual. Over the next 2 days, you'll have a chance to delve deeper on issues like climate change, global health, equal education, and more. You will also get to see UN agencies like the World Health Organization, UN Food Program, and UNICEF, among others, at work in the ground. UNA-USA has been globally engaged for more than 75 years. Even before going virtual was a way of life, our members have been finding ways to act locally and connect globally. This is more than what we do. It's who we are. We are a movement of Americans who know that building a brighter future requires our active participation. We span all ages, races, political parties, religions, and walks of life. Our mission to create a more peaceful, sustainable, and just world is lofty, but it is carried out by real people in their everyday, in their communities every single day. Although we haven't mobilized in person for quite some time, we've managed to make our movement even stronger. We've found new ways to come together, like this virtual gathering today. We've stepped up and we've advocated for global change. We've used our voices online and at the ballot box. We've found new creative ways to convene and collaborate, advocating for racial justice, health equity, democracy, and so much more. As a founding member of the UN, the US has long championed human rights, global health, democracy, and global peace. But in recent years, we stepped off the path to progress. With a new administration and a new Congress, we are reclaiming our seat at the table. As global citizens, we can support a new vision of the future, one where all people everywhere are healthy, safe, and free. This year's Global Engagement Summit is a chance to deepen your perspectives on the world's most pressing issues, explore the big questions that motivate you, generate new ideas to enhance your contributions as a global citizen, and build new lasting relationships with like-minded advocates. But I want to assign you one challenge. Take the conversations you experience here off this platform. Bring them to your social media channels, to your dinner tables, to your virtual classrooms. Bring them to your next family Zoom call. Continue them with new friends you meet in the Summit Chat Lounge. If you have not yet become a member of UNA USA, join us and connect to your nearest chapter, whether on a campus or in your local community. The United Nations is the only global body where 193 countries come together to improve the planet, and that's why we need it. We may not always agree with one another on the best roadmap for change, but solutions are always the goal. The world needs the UN, and the UN needs our voices. Once again, I want to thank each of you for joining us today and tomorrow, and for embracing a global perspective for which we all play a part. And now, before we move on, I also want to thank the Global Engagement Summit Committee, co-led by Akash Patel and Bettina Hausman, and the UNA USA team led by our Senior Director, Farah Eck, for all of their hard work and energy in organizing this summit. Speaking of Farah Eck, let's bring her to our virtual stage.
Thanks for kicking off the summit, Rachel. And I also want to echo your words by adding my welcome to all viewers of the Global Engagement Summit, both live and those who are watching us on demand. And quickly, I wanted to extend my heartfelt thanks to the summit's planning committee, but also to my colleagues within UNA USA and the UN Foundation for making this event an incredible virtual reality. I'm so pleased to be with you for so many reasons. but I had to share a personal one. I have been a member of UNA USA since 2013, when I helped to revamp the UNA Chicago chapter. Since then, I've served in many different capacities and leadership roles, both at the chapter level and at the national UNA level. And I've attended many global engagement summits, in fact, but this is definitely my first all virtual one. And now I'm also honored to mark 1 year serving as a staff person, working with the most amazing team at UNA USA within the UN Foundation. I became a volunteer because growing up and living in more than 9 different countries, I personally saw the work of the United Nations and how its agencies really, truly changed lives. I saw how UNICEF provided backpacks and books and schools in a box when I lived in Pakistan. I witnessed how UNHCR provided refugees with shelter when I lived in Kenya. And those are just a few of my experiences. And those experiences stuck with me until now. And as a volunteer turned staff, I know what it means to be a part of a movement with 20,000 members from across the United States. I totally get it. I feel it. I'm energized and I'm thrilled about it. But for those of you who aren't as familiar with the United Nations Association of the USA, you might be asking yourself, what is it all about? What is the connection between everyday Americans and the United Nations? What is the reason for wanting a strong US-UN relationship? What is about the Sustainable Development Goals? What is our local to global connection? So to answer those questions, we're going to share a brief video clip that will offer you a lot more information about UNA USA. But before we do that, let me just preface by saying, we do it because it matters. We do it because every single event that we attend, we learn more about the UN's impact in countries around the world. We do it because every single petition that we sign or every meeting with a member of Congress that we join is helping to support an issue that we are incredibly passionate about. We do it because, quite frankly, it's work that needs to get done. And we are those people who can and will get it done because we believe in the power of the United Nations.
Hola, and I would also like to extend my welcome to the thousands of viewers tuning in to the Global Engagement Summit. UNA USA's mission is to educate, inspire, and mobilize Americans to support the United Nations work. And that's just what we intend to do throughout the 2-day summit. We have a spectacular lineup, including everyday changemakers, influencers, United Nations representatives, lawmakers, and other advocates for global progress.
Thank you, Akash. As the chairs of the GES, Akash and I extend our heartfelt thanks to the Planning Committee, the UNA USA National Office, UN Foundation staff, Global Goals ambassadors, and the UNA USA National Council. Along with the thousands of viewers, we echo US Secretary John Kerry that yes, we are all in by celebrating America's re-entry into the Paris Agreement and to commit our time and resources to be thoughtful, inclusive global citizens, united in the spirit of our shared humanity, in solidarity. So please engage and enjoy the 2021 UNA USA Global Engagement Summit.